And our final speaker this morning, before we break for morning tea, has been at the heart of strategy for Dell, including positioning the XPS line as Dell's PowerPC, deepening relationships with Google, Microsoft and the like, and more recently studying network security. A big round of applause, please, for Kent Shuart. There you are. I was confident you were here.
Thank you. So my name is Kent Shuart. I am now 1 week into my new role at Dell as the Director of Product Marketing for SonicWall Dell in Asia. So I'm still getting an understanding of a lot of things, but I do appreciate the opportunity to come talk to you about a little bit about what's going on in terms of malware. And I'm going to take a very different look that you may have taken in terms of malware. If we look at malware as a business, it's an interesting little report we can find out. And so, let's see, there we are. So what I want to do is start talking about the Malware Inc. annual report. And this is a perspective that I think we all can learn from, as well as get an understanding as to where people are going and what they're thinking. In the terms of the letter to the shareholders, in terms of what Malware Inc. would be trying to tell you, it's been a great year. That's why it fills this room. It's also showing great opportunity, great chances of growth, a lot of new things that are going on. This is a wonderful thing for Malware Inc. this year. And we break this down. Let's take a highlight on the business. Costs are going down. According to Symantec, the total number of breaches from 2014 to 2015 went down slightly. So we've got costs in line. The good news is revenues are up because the total identities breach has gone up substantially. So what we have are fewer attacks, more breaches. And I think that's going to start seeing itself in terms of a trend in the coming year or so. But we're on track for a good year in 2016, as I'm sure you all know from what we've been seeing in the news in the last few weeks. The next thing is there's a lot of new products out there. I mean, think of a business. Business grows or business thrives on new products. There's an explosion of new malware types of variants that are out there. Take the old product, put a different color on it, and send it out there because it's not going to be noticed and identified. We're also going to create a bunch of new products. The big new product is mobile. And you start looking at, I look through this audience here, and I would imagine that less than half, probably less than a quarter of you are running some sort of anti-malware on your phone. So we're creating venues in which we can be connected to the internet, but we're leaving windows open that will allow us to get into the network and compromise it and create some sort of vulnerability. This is sort of an interesting slide, and I picked this out of the SecureWorks a report that just came out in April. And I really like the fact that the cost of MasterCard and Visa and stolen in quantities has gone down. It was about $8.59 last year. So now we're seeing some economies of scale going in because so many MasterCards and Visa have been stolen. But when you start looking at premium cards in the EU, so work your business in Europe, you get a whole lot more for your dollar. US email accounts, corporate email accounts, I can find out what your email address is with all your access information for $500. The deep web, the dark web, or whatever you want to call it, there's a really good trade going on in that. They can, with confidence, say that it doesn't matter what sort of company you're in or what sort of protection you're in, we can still get your email address. Exploit kits are up. Exploit kits are really interesting because exploit kits for the Angler exploit kit for $100 to $135 is not the product. It's a subscription to the product. And incidentally, that also includes free updates. And if you pay for additional $40, we'll give you tutorials on how to make how to execute this exploit kit. So there's a real interesting little development in terms of where the software is going. Then you start looking at identity kits, passports, and things like that. They're all over the place. The market is doing wonderful if you're Malware Inc. So here's my conclusion. Malware's big business. It's growing like crazy. We need to do something about that because they have very sophisticated business models. I would liken the cost and business model of Microsoft Office to the cost and business model of the most sophisticated malware out there right now. So you start looking at Malware Inc., they're learning from us and really growing their business. Everyone does a threat summary, a threat report. I'm not going to go into those details. I mean, there's one, Dell obviously has one. Symantec I quoted, Mandiant has one. Everybody seems to have some sort of insight on what's going on in the market. What I want to look at is the conclusion. And the conclusions on this that I've been gaining from looking at many different types of threat reports is the first thing is that when I was in a meeting last week where someone stood on the stage and said, for most of you here who are working in the info industry, start using SSL more readily. What a great statement. Improve your privacy, be able to hide things. Well, that's a great statement if you're in malware business, because your firewall most likely does not inspect encrypted elements. In fact, it's a very computationally intensive effort in order to decrypt a file, which lowers the throughput of the firewall, which reduces the need that people are going to say, wait a minute, I don't want to use this feature of the firewall because it slows my network down. But let me give you a different perspective on that. The perspective on that I would contend with is that you didn't know that malware encrypted in a file was something you need to scope for when you purchased your firewall. You bought too small of a firewall. You can't handle the decryption capabilities. Mobile attacks, very straightforward, as I mentioned, anti-malware on your phone. And finally, if you're going to be good at building malware, and Malware Inc. is really looking for these sort of people, you're going to be good at building evasion techniques. And there's a lot of different techniques that are out there that are designed to get around firewall, get around detection, and hide yourself or obfuscate what you're doing within in a network in order to allow you to do the bad things you want to do. Okay, so this is the money slide. This is the slide you got to be worried about. And that is, behaviors are changing as a result of the eroding confidence that is being experienced by end users. I tell people when I'm in banking conferences that their banking apps just don't work. They're great at moving money around, but they're horrible in terms of protecting yourselves. When someone asks me, what's the one thing I need to protect myself against, I basically say, don't use a banking app on your phone. That's my eroding confidence in our ability to protect people. Not only that, but it's not just banking, but it's shopping. And as we heard from Kane about AI, there's things that you do on the web, doesn't matter what type of behavior you exhibit, we're going to follow that. So what are you going to do? A lot of people say, let's stop using the web for many things. So the idea behind this and the idea behind Malware Inc. is it's changing the culture. It's changing our behaviors in terms of what we want to do and our ability to take care of what the internet is going to deliver us. So a couple predictions. One, and this one's so obvious, ransomware is going to be just the bonanza for anyone who really wants to make a lot of money on the web. If you look at this, a couple of years ago, there were only a couple different variants of ransomware out on the marketplace. Now, there are hundreds. In 2016, in the first, I think this is the first 3 months of 2016, is that you see an explosion of malware variants, even from what happened in the previous year. So ransomware becomes a very big player in the marketplace. It's sort of funny. What I usually have as my next slide is one of the ransomware screenshots, because I collect those. And there's a lot of people who are going to see that screenshot next year. When you do, I want you to think about this. It's the theme of Jaws. Da-dum, da-dum. You're being stalked. We've got you now. And ransomware is going to be successful in 2016, as well as I would expect in 2017 as well. Encrypted malware grows. For those of you who are using secure socket layer transmissions, that's a great thing for you. It's an even better thing for those people who are going to send malware to you, because you're not protected from that. This is an interesting statement because obviously from my accent, I'm not from Australia, I'm from the United States. I think you're going to start seeing some interesting malware happening in the elections in the United States this year. As crazy as it is, we can make it crazier for things like denial of service attacks, defacing websites, and really trying to get at people in terms of the election cycle. This is going to happen on a worldwide basis. The Internet of Things, again, great opportunity. Again, if you start thinking of the theme that I'm looking at, Malware Inc. is a growing business, and we're creating more opportunities for Malware Inc. to be even more successful. The Internet of Things right now is this big. In 2020, it's going to be this big. We haven't built security into that functionality yet. And you take a very straightforward thing, your Android phone, your Apple phone, these sort of things are very susceptible to attacks. Now you start looking at how people want to have a connected or a smart home. Those devices that you have that allow you to open the door with a click from your phone allows you to open the door with a click from anybody's phone. All they got to do is understand what your security measures are. Not hard to figure out. Third parties continue as an attack vector. If I want to get to your company, the easiest way I can get into your company is through a small business that is basically doing business with you and working into your unsecured network. As Target learned, the guy who went to fix the AC was also the person who introduced the virus into the network. And by not having isolation between different opportunities, different organizations, different functions in the organization, you open yourself up to a lot of problems. This, in a nutshell, was what happened with the Bangladesh bank. No isolation between groups allows malware to jump into other organizations, get into root control, and allow you to exploit the organization, in this case to the tune of $81 million. Now the good news is that there's a way in which we can make Malware Inc. go out of business. Now, I'm not going to boil the ocean and give you, 47,000 different ideas. There's some good, simple steps that every one of you can take that are not that hard to figure out and implement. Chances are, if you've got an old firewall, when I mean an old firewall, I mean a firewall that's over probably a year, maybe 2 years old. If it doesn't necessarily protect you from or inspect encrypted sessions, that firewall is only doing half the job. It's a fire and not a wall. There's a lot of education issues on. I've talked to people about this, is that the reason the Bangladesh bank the bank heist was found out is someone spelled the word foundation wrong. And I was talking to Brody, I don't see him this morning, I was talking to Brody last night. I said, new career path. You can be a proofreader for a malware company. And in that case, what you can do is your education will allow Malware Inc. to get even further along. But if people are less inclined to click on a link that they don't, from a source they don't know or don't understand, it's pretty interesting. It cuts down the opportunity in which you have malware attacks. Password discipline is an interesting statement because it's not what you think it is. Don't look at passwords as something each one of you are involved in. Look at the passwords of the privileged accounts, because you go into an IT department and you go ask them, do you all share the same password for the password unlocking account for the network? Chances are they say yes. If passwords on privileged accounts are not audited and secured, the ability to get in and capture those privileged accounts becomes a lot easier. So the discipline in passwords is not individual discipline, it's the discipline of really privileged account passwords, so you can audit and track those. And finally, the thing I hate the most about is our patches. More often than not, on my home computer, when I wake up in the morning and walk into my office, is my computer screen is at a standstill because it stops every time it reboots because I've got a strange configuration. That's just an indicator to me that I had a patch implemented last night. But you got to have patches, you got to implement them, you have to do it, and you have to have the type of discipline and policies in place in order to do it. What I'm looking at right here are not hard things to do. It's things to check on, it's questions to ask, and it's processes to follow. This is a way we can get ahead of Malware Inc. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for the fact that Dell was paying for me to come out. I want to mention just one slide. It's my sort of wrap-up slide. Is we have the ability to manage passwords. We have the ability to encrypt data. We can break the breach cycle with our firewalls. And finally, our case product will allow you to build upon patch management. I appreciate your time here, and I would hope you have a great conference, and thank you very much. Thanks.